Hello there, you guys. So, if you're following along with the Cherry Blossom Challenge, then you already hopefully saw this video where I painted out some of the colors and we just kind of experimented with mixing them and seeing what they look like together, even how some just splotches can turn into some random backgrounds. So, that was fun. But now let's get a little more serious and into challenges so that you can learn more about drawing flowers. I notice a lot of times my students will draw flowers that look really flat. So I thought this lesson here might be really helpful in you evaluating how you draw a flower, and maybe even if you're going to freehand it with paint, just get you into the motion of thinking about how flowers have different perspectives, so that when you walk around and you're looking in springtime and you're observing things, you'll notice more about what flowers actually look like. So I would suggest that you take out maybe the Newton or one of the not 100% cotton watercolor papers so that you can practice drawing some of these flowers. And let's go over the instructions. If you added this pen to your set, then you are really going to be happy because you're going to have a waterproof pen that you can draw with. If not, you can pick these up on my website at Jack's Watercolor. This is the Winsor and Newton paper. It is a really, really nice practice paper. I think they've done a good job on this paper actually, but it's not like 100% cotton. This is a 50-50, so it does kind of sit on the top, but at the same time it's got a little bit of tuft, but it does well with ink and wash, and it's a good practice paper. So if you can get it at an affordable price, you definitely want to. So starting with a large circle as a guide for the outer edge of your flower, you want to think in terms of every flower, no matter what, is kind of rotating within a circle. This is how I learned it when I was younger and in art school. So if you think about like, okay, within this circle, we are going to use the outer circle to shape the flower, right? Then your circle doesn't necessarily have to be a perfect circle. It could be an imperfect circle. And as the circle changes, it's going to change the shape of the flower. See what I mean? So if you can kind of like get into that idea that when you look at these flowers, they're not all perfect circles, but they're within a circle. But now you can kind of see, like if I were looking at this, right, and I were going to draw a circle around it, then you would see how some of it touches the circle and some doesn't. Or you can make an imperfect circle, more of an oval shape, and then paint the flower with inside of that. And as these circles turn, you notice that they're basically, you could imagine a perfect circle around them, and then it would show you where they sit within that circle. Like, see how this one goes here, and then this one almost touches, and this one touches, and this one touches, and this one touches. But like there's some areas where it's not touching, and that's going to change how we perceive the flower as opposed to this one, which is right square into your face, which is the most common kind of circle and flower perspective that I see most of my beginners painting. We want to master these other ones, right? Not just this one. In fact, if you avoid drawing this one altogether, I would be just as happy, because I think that you've got plenty of practice doing that one, and you probably could use to just do a bunch of ones that don't, have that one circular shape. So a small circle towards the center of the guide is the other thing you want to pay attention to. So like if you had a large circle on the outside and then the center of the flower were a smaller circle, that's a good way to start and kind of like start realizing that that's what you're looking at here. Now, I don't want you to shape the center of your flowers into perfect little circles, because that will drive you crazy and you'll end up making donuts, which is a lot of the mistakes that people make when they make roses. So we want to know that this is our guide, but we don't want to be really literal with the guide. We want to kind of be perfectly imperfect every time. Then for the shape of each petal, you can take the instructions from number 3, draw 3 round teardrop shaped petals from the center circle within the confines of the outer circle, guides spaced evenly apart. So you're going to draw the first 3. So they can be 3, just any 3, right? And then the ones behind it will go behind them. So let's go ahead and first, I'm not going to draw a circle because I don't want you to be locked into that. I am going to draw a little bit of a dotted center, okay? So let me get you in a little closer so you can see what I'm doing here. Okay. So I draw like just a loose little dotted center like that. Then I'm going to take 3 shapes. So I don't want perfectly round shapes. What I want is like teardrop shapes. Like that. And then I'm going to do another one here. I'm not trying to make them all the same at all. Look at that. Great. So see one's smaller, this one's kind of medium, this one's a little bit larger. You can make them similar, but I prefer not to because I feel like when I look at flowers, they just don't all look the same, right? You see how this one's a little smaller than this one. This one's kind of similar, but this one's a little bigger. It's because of the angle that we're looking at. And when I make them too similar, they don't look right. It just looks too flat. So many times I won't even draw them. I'll just paint them because the brush, you know, my brush will just paint random looking flower petals that are similar but not the same. So when I go to do the next set, you're going to put the 3 additional petals underneath these petals, but with similar symmetry. Not the same, but similar. So maybe this one here, I'm going to imagine it's going under this. So like imagine it's going under there, but don't draw it. Or if it's easier, you can use pencil. And then I'm going to just go here and then just kind of randomly come around and then under. And there's one. And this one, I'm going to go up and just do a little peek and under. And then this one, maybe a little more pointed and under. And there we go. We have a cherry blossom. Now, if you want to add in any like style lines just for your eye on this first one, you can do these. And what these style lines will do is just kind of make you think about which ways the petals are going. Just gives you a little detail. I find that many people, once they have these style lines in purposefully, then after that, I notice them putting them in the watercolor and even shaping out their watercolor to mimic the lines, you know? Okay, so we just added some lines. So see how easy that is? We're going to do the branches in just a second, but let's take a look at what it says. Draw a few stems flowing out of the core, pointing towards the flower's open direction. So if this one's kind of open more towards me, we could just do an imperfect line like this. Make it a little bit thicker on one part, maybe thinner on another. Add a few broken little dots and dashes. I like broken dots and dashes actually, you know. Put a little stem, little broken dots and dash there, and then maybe do a little bud, just a loose little bud like that. The wood stems are typically imperfect, rough shaped lines. They are jutting out in a lot of different directions. So I even like to hold like a rigger brush and do it. But if you're going to draw, then you can just get really messy with it. And I find that the messier I am, the better it is. So I tend to like do these things at the farthest point of my brush or my pen. And that just, to me, I feel like it makes a nicer shape. You see what I mean? Like I'm just trying not to just be not perfect at all. Perfectly imperfect. I also find that if I make flowers a little bit less, I would say less round, right? More with angles, I find that the angles make the flower just, to me, it just pops. It just looks better. I don't know why. It's just one of those things. You see how sketchy it looks? So don't think that you have to draw it all in one piece like I did here. In fact, I think it's really nicer if we do it with dots and dashes. Isn't that beautiful? To me, that's more artistic, more expressive, and more fun to look at, and actually more fun to draw. So did you see how I do it? Shall we do another one? So I'm just going to connect this in with just some squiggly lines. And I like all the different little scratches, little chicken scratches. I think that they're nice in these drawings. This is a great pen, isn't it? It's so much fun to draw with because it's really wet. I have thinner ones too coming, so if you want something that's like less thick and more fine, I'll have those too, but I think this is just such a great weight to draw with because you can really like get a lot of really nice shadows and shades in there. So let's do another one. We can take a look at some of these here. Maybe just, I always just start with the center. So I'm doing this because it's kind of curling. I want to give the appearance that this is round, like curled like that. And then maybe my next petal will be sitting underneath that. And then this petal could come out here. See how I did that nice little angle there? I really think this lesson is going to help you draw better flowers. If you haven't taken my watercolor floral for beginners class, I really recommend that because it's a great place to start, especially if you are really kind of overwhelmed and confused, you know? Just tons and tons of shapes and different flowers, and you can just really dig in. So I did a shorter petal here so that it kind of looks like it's, you know, like you've got the larger flowers and you're at an angle like this. And then let's connect this here. And there. Okay. So that's good for now. We can put a few little buds there. Maybe here. That's good. It's got nice symmetry. I think that I don't want to get crazy because we'll end up painting all day. All right, so that is how I draw flowers. Another thing we can do in this particular lesson, because we haven't really gone over the time, and we're going to color in the next lesson, is thinking about your shadows and shades. Now, this is something we're going to readdress when we start coloring this in. What's my time doing on this one? Not too bad. Maybe we will paint this time. So this one is a value map guide, and it says use the value guide for inspiration on your shadows, your background, and your loose painting. Now look closely. This is a very loose painting. If you look, I have just kind of winged it. Seriously, this was a painting that I turned into black and white so you could see the values a lot easier. And you can see where like there's really, really light amounts of color, even some white of the paper left. And then maybe like, I would say, I can count, let's see, the white of the paper is 1 value. The light areas like here would be 2. Then there's a little bit darker is 3. A little darker is 4. This is another shade 5. This is a darker shade 6. And then a really dark shade 7. So there's actually at least 7, maybe 10 different values in here within the paint colors. So just don't worry about what color they are. Just think the values. So some are lights and some are darks. Now, how do you get values? That's what you're going to need one of these for, because you're going to have to put the color from here into here, and then you mix you mix it on your brush, you know, whether you're going to mix paint together or you're going to add a little bit more water to your mix and start lighter, let it dry, and then add it and build it up. Now you can also, if you have too much on your, if you have too much color on your brush and it gets like really cloggy like that and you don't want it to be that dark, then there are different things you can do. If it's dried, you can add a little water to it. You can also take a cloth and just pick it up, right? And now you've got a lighter shade, or you can remove it altogether depending on how dark it actually is. So it looks like we do have time to paint. So let's go ahead. I am going to start my centers with just a little bit of a light wash just by tapping it. And then I'll just remove some of it just for speed. And this is just going to kind of like give me that lighter areas. But if you notice, I'm not trying to necessarily stay within the lines. I'm just giving myself a splash of color as my base. We're going to let that dry, and I'm going to start playing with my blue in with some of these purples. So I'm just going to kind of scrub it around. Not worried about the branches because we're going to use that beautiful, lovely gray. So scrubbing it around, and it can mix with the watercolors because it just makes it a little more beautiful, you know, makes it a little more tonal. So if it does tap onto some of that pink, all the better. It's going to look more loose and prettier. I think a lot of times I see people trying to be so perfect with their staying in the lines and not letting colors mix. And then I can just add a little bit of water here. And even though this isn't 100% cotton, not that I don't like the little blue on the flowers, it's kind of nice. I'm just going to pick it up because this is my own watercolor, so I happen to know that it is not heavily staining. So isn't that nice? And then if I wanted to drop in more color, I can do that. If you want to get a little more dramatic in some areas, like maybe we'll do a little more drama over here. Let's just go over it. And then I just want it blended through here. And this is just, you know, according to your eye. I'm just kind of speed drying things a little bit. Okay. So that's what I have for the first part. So I have some of the pink that I washed down. I have some of our beautiful blue. I have orange on my fingers. I have some of the beautiful blue that I've added in even more. And it's granulating, and we can even drop in some more of this color, kind of like in a negative painting kind of way here. There's some streaks across the page. Surprisingly fast, isn't it? Really pretty. So, so beautiful. Okay, it needs to dry, but I'm not going to wait. I'm going to grab some of my orange. And I'm going to come from the outer edge and just kiss it like the sun. Just give it a nice little glaze of this orange, leaving some of these areas just light white. They don't all have to be colored. Just kissing it in there like the sun. Now remember, we did ink already, so we've already got our limitations outlined for us. It might actually be easier for some of you. And then in some areas you can take some of the color and drop it in a little darker maybe. Like I'm going to go and highlight the fact that this is a lower a lower petal just by giving it a little more orange, making it a little brighter. And again, you could take the pink if you want more than the orange. I just happen to love the color. I think it's such a beautiful orange. Okay. Now I'm going to take some of the granulating pink and just kind of tap it in there a bit, just in a few areas to give it a little more of a moodier shade of pink in some places, not all. Like maybe a little here, because this is my more moody pink shade, you know. So maybe down here, or we could do the underside. Enhance some of that. We can even use this color in the background mixed with your blue if you wanted to try something a little more like lavender or purple. Okay, now I'm going to take the brighter pink and I'm going to try and do a nice little wash here where I still leave some. See how I did that, where I left this area light and this area light? I'm just going to pull some of this color through. This is beautiful. And this is entirely up to the artist's eye. There is no rhyme or reason. I'm letting my eye just kind of guide me here. Like I want in my vision to have a nice painterly look of watercolor. I want some areas where the colors just mix so nicely together. And I want some areas where you can see maybe a brush stroke. Like here it's more wet, right? So you're not really going to see the brush stroke as much. It's going to try and blend, but I can go over it a few times. But I definitely want that painterly kind of look to it. Looking good so far, right? Isn't that pretty? If you're really daring before it dries and you want to start adding some dark, you can. It just depends on the look you want, because remember, it's going to start spreading out. I happen to really like this look. You can experiment with having it spread into your other paints or not. I'm just keeping it more into the center. To me, when it naturally spreads into the paint, it just adds more depth and dimension. And if ever, like I full on know that if ever it's too much, I can always draw it back later just by adding a little bit of water and removing some of the color. So it doesn't really bother me. I never feel like I'm stuck or trapped in any way. I'm going to take a little bit of that shadow berry color or shadow blossom color and mix it with a little bit of the cochineal red. And I'm going to just give my branches a little touch of it. Just because when I put that gray, it's just going to give it like, I don't know, just a little tone that I like. You know, there's a little purple tone. Now I can go and start mixing in with some of this gray. And feel free, you can like mix it all together, you know. So I'm going to do a nice watery wash of the gray first. And of course, I'm not going to paint inside the lines because I am incapable of doing that anymore. I did that for so many years. All of my commissions were highly detailed watercolors and inks and architectural drawings and stuff. And so I feel like at this day and point in time in my art, I just refuse to paint inside the lines. I just have to mess it all up, but I like it that way. Okay, so you see how I kind of went through and I created some additional branches that are just in very light. Now I'm going to take a little bit more of this color, and before it all dries, I can just kind of tap it in to certain areas. And much like the way that we painted, or the way I drew, where we just did a dot and a dash instead of a full-on. There we go. Then I'm just kind of like moving it through, and that's how I get my lights and darks. So if you wanted to leave like this one in the background, you could, or we could just add a little bit of dark to it and even add some water to it and get something in between in just a couple of areas like that. See how I just kind of like touch just a little bit of it? It makes it just a lot looser and a lot more fun. And even here where it's still wet, I'm just kind of gonna go right there, because it, if you don't like it, you can always take it out. Isn't that pretty? So now once all this dries, there are a couple of different things that you can play with and do. You could take some more of the like caput mortem color, which is the shadow, what's it called? Shadow blossom. And you can add a little shadow blossom to your stems for that really nice little shadowy look. You can also choose some areas in your blossoms and add some shading. You can also use it to reinforce some of the style lines in the paints. So many flexible things, But remember, depending on how big your blossoms are, using more of the shadow color could actually take a lot of the brightness out of your flowers. So you do want to proceed with caution, and something that is probably better for the larger sheets of paper, because if you do too much shading on a very, very small blossom and you haven't done them big enough, then ultimately it's not really going to be your favorite. But see how this, so now doesn't this make more sense? You know what I mean? It makes more sense, right? So you can see how bright this is, but like the background, let's see if my light is so bright. Let me see if I can adjust this. Boy, this is so bright. I wonder if my camera has a way of adjusting it so you can see it, but I will put pictures. I'll definitely put this up on our watercolor group page, because I feel like it looks lighter on the screen than it does in person. So when you look at areas like here, how do you reflect that? Well, right now I'm seeing that here, but if I wanted to just roll my brush more and do some negative painting, I am still free to do that. You shouldn't be afraid of it, because you can seriously just re-wet things and douse it with a lot more color and then just blend it out. And this is not even, this is just a regular practice paper. It's a nice quality practice paper. So I'm leaving some areas of light and then just kind of washing that out. And then if I want to speed up the dry time or even get more of that mottled effect, I'm just taking like a rag over it. And now I'm looking for balance. So like this seems to be like an area here where I could tap in a little more color. And again, once it dries, you can always go back in and add more of the branches if you feel like some of the branch has washed away for your taste. But remember, there is no real right and wrong. You know, like people make the mistake of thinking, oh, my watercolors don't look right. Well, what is right? I mean, if you love the way you're painting and it speaks to you and it makes you happy, even if it's not the way you paint next year, that's the most important thing, is that you're enjoying being in the present. I mean, one of the reasons why I sent you a cherry blossom was to remind you to be in the present, to take time out for yourself and sit with a nice cup of coffee and just draw and paint a few little flowers, you know, maybe get up an extra 20 minutes and find that time for yourself to just meditate and paint some cherry blossoms. I'm taking the cochineal red and I'm just kind of dragging my dry brush, over the petals. I do this a lot in my watercolors because I love the look of it. I love the effect it gives me. Again, it gives me that lovely kind of like mottled effect. And this is techniques that I do teach in my classes. And you can look the classes up at jacquelinejax.com. There's tons and tons of beautiful watercolor classes. All really fun, you know. You have forever access. You can use them as references. Okay. So I want to leave still a lot of light in this so you can see the areas that are light. Now I'm going to show you something else. So this is one way that we can have it, right? So let me take a picture so that I mark it. Okay. Now, if you feel like it's too bright, you could spritz it with a little water and take a cloth and just get that model effect up and then let it dry. You're not harming anything. And you see what it does? See how it gives you even more lights and darks, right? So you just take a water, spritz it a little bit. And that's a pretty fair amount of water. Don't be afraid of watercolor, you know? And then I can just go in here and lift out randomly some of the color, because you can always put it back in. So see how much I'm lifting? I'm just kind of going through. Do not use toilet paper on your watercolor. Use a clean rag that won't leave lint and won't leave pieces of fiber on your watercolor. So please, no toilet paper. I don't even know where people got that idea, because toilet paper is like the worst thing. Isn't that great? So you can see it's still pretty glossy. I did lift some of the color. I can always go back in and punch up the brightness, because watercolor, you know, you can add layers. Especially my watercolor that I make, it's really flexible and easy to use, you know. Again, there's some that's kind of swimming around here on top of the blue. If I don't like it, I can just take it out with my fingers. I can add more blue. We can wait till this dries and completely wet it down and start washes over it for layers to build up the color. There's so many things that you can do. You are really limitless here. So I don't want you to ever be afraid to just make a mess and try different things. This is only like a first layer technically, right? And I even sprayed it down and wiped it off. So you cannot hurt your watercolors. The worst thing that can happen is you don't like it so much, and then you're like, okay, I'll study it. Let me look at it and see how I want to do it differently. Like maybe if you don't want it to be as shadowy, then we don't use the shadow color next time. You use more of the lighter colors. But you will never find out until you start playing with it and going down this road, you know? And now at this point in time, because it's still wet, I cannot go over the branches because the paper itself is wet. See the shine? You want to wait till this is entirely dry. So set it aside and take another piece of paper out of your pack and start another drawing. It will keep you occupied because your fingers are going to want to fiddle with this. But the way to not fiddle with your watercolor is to set it aside as a reference and open another sheet of paper. Get another one out. If you're scared to use the big sheet, fold it in half and use it as 1, 2, 3, 4 drawings. You know what I mean? You don't have to use the whole thing. In fact, I tend not to send really big sheets because I feel like they're more intimidating than anything else. And you guys hoard them and don't use them. So I tend to like try and give you a bunch of smaller sheets because at this point in time, you probably are less intimidated by the smaller if you just have multiple ones. Anyway, I hope you guys are enjoying the subscription. Don't forget to look through the challenges and other things you have in here for inspiration. You guys all got different ones, so there's a lot here. I'm going to be doing another painting very, very shortly. That's lesson, what, number 2, I think, so far. So that really kind of goes over some of the value mapping and how to draw the flowers. I will be doing a much larger, very loose one without the ink and wash kind of style, and I will be doing a cherry blossom tree coming up very soon. I hope you guys are enjoying the subscription. There is a link in the description box here on YouTube if you want to sign up for the monthly subscription. I think you'll love it. You'll get these paint sets and they're all themed and just everything is in there that you need to paint. You can do it with your friends too. I have some people that literally call each other up on like Skype and they paint together and they open these things together. And I think that that's a great idea. I love the fact that you guys are having a ball with it and enjoying it. And that's what it's here for. That's why I'm working so hard. Have a great day, you guys, and happy painting.